Hey guys, Aaron Stroman with 11-1 Leadership, bringing you on the journey of what it takes to start up a new leadership organization real time. And I'm currently taking you guys through Volumployee, my new book that unpacks the overlap of leadership of volunteers and leadership of employees. Title's kind of creative, merging the words volunteer and employee. But the concept is we can lead volunteers one way and learn from leadership of volunteers that actually applies to leading employees also. Sometimes people make a hard distinction between those two, but I think we can learn from them. Today I'm going to share with you the next chapter, which is titled Sharpen the Axe. Now, this is a concept taken from Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's a concept that Stephen Covey took from Proverbs. The concept is, if you're going to spend some time chopping down a tree, maybe splitting logs, maybe the most useful part of your time is going to be on the front end, sharpening the axe. You'll go further, faster than the person who just picks up the axe and begins swinging against some trees. This idea, when it comes to leading volunteers and employees, is simple training. For volunteers, I spent a lot of time training volunteers before I actually had them engage in service. This varied for me over my past, as long as 8 weeks. I used to take volunteers through 2-month training before they would even get their boots on the ground and begin doing the leadership that I was training them for. Currently, I spend 4 weeks with volunteers before they get engaged in the actual leadership of the ministry. And this has served me well because it's like sharpening that axe. Take time to lead volunteers, make sure that they are properly equipped, properly trained, that they catch the vision of the organization, that they know their roles, and they're committed to them. I take time of training to get to know them better on a personal level and to help them to know me better on a personal level as well. And again, this just stretches out the longevity of a volunteer's engagement in the organization. I've always tried my best to make the training an enjoyable process. Sometimes we think of training like a classroom setting where we have to watch videos and be bored. But I try to mix it up and make it fun, make it enjoyable. I even try to train in the way that I want my leaders to interact with the students in the ministry. So I even use how I train as a model for them to follow. The last church I was at in Maryland, the training was such a good system and actually so enjoyable that even after I left that church, I had other volunteers who led the training process for new volunteers. And so you get a good training down, a good system of how to set up people to win in your organization or in your ministry. That's going to be a long-term investment for the years to come. So the big question is, how can we take this idea of training when it comes to volunteers and apply it to employees, leading employees? And the answer is quite simple. Well, we need to train employees. Some organizations get this really good, and they are on top of it. I think of like military or law enforcement. They spend an incredible amount of time doing some training on the front end before they actually let the guys get their boots on the ground. Some institutions and organizations are not good at this. Some of them are just average. I think the stereotype that we get in our mind is like, new employee training, where someone in human resources takes a person through a handbook and shows them around the building. And by all means, there's some legal ramifications that we need to follow there. Let's ask this question: why don't all organizations spend as much time training their employees as a lot of organizations do spending time training their volunteers? I think that's a great question that we should unpack. One of the reasons is you can spend all the time in the world training your volunteers. In my case, 2 months, at the longest, but my volunteers aren't on payroll for 2 months during that process. Okay, so some of this is a financial problem, which I understand. We've got to figure out creative ways to work around that, because you can't have an employee on the job for 2 months and be paying them simply just to go through a training. Most people probably need employees to start delivering, doing their job before then. So that's fair. Another hurdle is for an employee to receive training, someone's got to do the training. And if I'm the person who hires the employee, well, guess what? My job isn't just to train 24/7. And so now I'm conflicted. I got to work in training as well as doing my job and delivering what I'm supposed to deliver. And so that creates a little bit of conflict of interest also. Coming off that concept of thought is having someone else do the training puts them into a non-billable status, if I can use that terminology, right? They're doing training for another employee. Well, we're really not going to be able to bill their time to any clients or any customers. And so it could actually end up costing a lot of money to train someone. The question is it worth it, and how do we work around that if it's not? If I can refer back to a couple weeks ago, I talked about having an entitled attitude, an entitled mindset. And I had this too when it came to leading employees. My mindset was, man, I'm paying you money to do this job. Obviously you have some sort of foundational intelligence or training skill set that got you hired. Can't you just figure it out? And that's what you're being paid for, right? Can't you just figure this out? Like, I don't want to train. I don't spend time developing a training curriculum or training program. I just need people to do their job. But again, isn't that an entitled attitude? I've turned from my ways and try not to have that entitled attitude, but that's where I was. And so here are some practical steps that I have taken, both leading volunteers and employees, that I think would serve everyone well when it comes to training. First one, think big picture. Okay, we get caught up in the immediate, training someone's going to take time, it's going to take my time, it's going to cost money, I'm paying them, but they're really not doing their job yet. We got to step back and think big picture. Good training on the front end will save you hours and days and weeks of time in the future, right? It's just like sharpening the axe. Spend a little bit of time sharpening that axe before we cut down the tree. Guess what? We may cut down more trees quicker with a sharp axe than the guy who gets started right off the bat with an axe that is not sharp. Same thing with employees. A well-trained employee in the long run is going to deliver much more efficiency than someone that we just plug in and get going without the proper training. So we have to think big picture. Secondly, think on-the-job training. On-the-job training helps people learn by experience, and most people learn best by experience. It's one thing to take someone through a manual, but if you can take them alongside you and say, hey, come follow me as we do this together, they're going to learn very quickly. So that on-job training is always very efficient. Next, think synergy. Synergy. You can build some momentum and get everyone on the same page if you have a thoroughly thought through and intentional training process that everyone goes through. So when the new employee comes on board, goes through the entire training, all the other employees will be able to relate to that person, and he'll be able to relate to them because they've all had the same experience at the front end of their employment. Right? This builds some rapport, it builds unity and community, and it can really build some synergy to the team. Next, make it personal. A lot of times we try to separate our personal lives from work lives, but if you make training personal, it'll help the time spent at the organization feel like family instead of just work. And I think that the more relationships we can add to our interaction with employees, being their friends, helping them out personally, not just professionally, even in the training, making it a casual, comfortable environment to have the training in. Oh my goodness. It makes it personal, and again, that will elongate the longevity of a new employee. Finally, decide who trains. Who's going to be the person that does the training? This will vary from organization to organization. There is no right or wrong answer here, but it's important for this question to be able to be answered by all the leadership in the organization. Who does the training? Is it the department head? Is it HR? Is it a specific person that's hired on to do training? Does it just fall among the team? I think once you have established who the person is who's supposed to do the training, which you might be surprised how many organizations don't have that question answered. Once you have that established and decided, then someone can own it and do it well, and spend that time on the front end training, just like sharpening an axe before cutting down a tree. That's a summary of this chapter. Again, I'd love your guys' feedback, other ideas and suggestions, and if you give me permission, I'll use it in the book and accredit it to you as well. I'll give you credit, I won't give you royalties, but we can work out something, meet in the middle. Tune in next week as I take you through the next chapter of Volumployee, and until then, lead well.